So, any news from you, Richard?
No, no, nothing at all. Nothing from me
Doc,
archaeological.
what's that?
Nothing archaeological from me.
Fair enough. Did you get a bounce district this week? No.
I haven't looked at it.
All right. Goff
I've
sent me
been
an
busy.
Goff sent me a message saying, "I've lost the Zoom link. Can you please send it by email?" Well, I don't know who's on tonight, but it's definitely Goff. Right.
I
Thank you for that, Richard.
retrieve it. I managed to retrieve it.
There's nothing wrong with a bit of retrieval. You know that.
I know.
So
it disappeared, then it came back.
that's what I say about, yeah. Anything from you, Goff?
No, nothing new, but there's been a lot of discussion on various things I've been listening to and watching about the fine, the four-wheel chariots. Yeah, a lot of theories about what they were. So that was quite interesting. So yeah, that's
what
all.
about the What about the theories that people use them to move grain around? That's just quite easy, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah, they
So,
were a war chariots, or they may be just for show, for like specially you only use special times. But who knows?
it's just like coming up with an invention. It's only to be used by a certain type of person. I never really go with those arguments. I like to feel that these are for the society that they're created by.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
oh God, Pat.
Yes. Well, I got this membership renewal form,
Oh right, yes.
Yeah. And I thought I'd paid recently, both the things, the 50 and the other. And on February 12th, I paid 35 to you.
What I'm going to do is probably our systems are a bit haywire. So February the 12th.
Yeah, February 35.
That that might actually be on the that might actually be on the February list, which is, yeah, don't worry, Pat, I will look.
Okay.
Yeah, I had one as well, Carl.
What's yours? What? Don't tell me you've paid as well.
Yep. Weeks ago.
How many weeks?
Well, February, end of January, I think.
Yeah, when we were paying our 50
Or that was probably the end of February.
Right, okay. I will just see what's amiss here now.
I paid the 12th of February. Yeah.
Stop being so specific.
And then the 20th, I paid the 50.
Okay, I'm just having a quick look now. Right, okay. I will see what I can find in the break.
Okay, thank you.
Right, it shouldn't be too difficult. Right, okay, right. Okay. Yeah, you've paid the 12th of February.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why you've got that then.
Okay.
You're actually I can't yes. There you go. And seeing that I'm reading the right list, part of your postcode is 1RU.
That's right.
So I'll have to make sure about Richard as well. But anyway, not a problem. Anyway, thanks for mentioning that. At least the postal system's working.
Yeah.
Anything else from you, Pat?
Nope, that's it.
Anyway, apologies for that. Well, if you're on the list, I didn't even know why you had the letter. Okay, I'll trace Richards. Right. Now, if Henry turns up, just add him on, and we're gonna have a good old look-see at Danebury. And today, for once, we're going to look at a category of Iron Age site that we haven't actually looked at all. Iron Age shrines. We're also going to look at something that disagrees with some of the things I've been saying, i.e., there was not much warfare and there was not much fighting and evidence for fighting in the Iron Age. However, the reason why we're doing Danebury, there are exceptions to the rule, because Danebury has it all, really. So I again, the approach is to really give you my opinion and to go as far as we can, and then suddenly we have something that knocks the overall thing that I talk about with this whole issue about fighting in the Iron Age. And so I think one of the things I want to do is to look at this Danebury site with storage pits, with 500 rectangular buildings, 73 roundhouses. Most of the rectangular buildings are for storing things. The storage pits for grain and various other things as well. But that's not all that we find at Danebury. So let's have a little look at these images. And there they go. And gallery. And what we do have are all those images. So that's Danebury. And if anyone wants to know where Danebury is, we will show you a map of that in not so long a time. And I think the best thing to do is start off with a really nice piece written by the archaeologist who excavated at this site, called Barry Cunliffe, between 1969 and 1988. And I do believe he was still lecturing in archaeology up until a few years ago. So he's been around a little bit in archaeology. And what we're going to do, we're going to crack straight into it. Now, Danebury Rings is a multi-valet hill fort, bank and ditched enclosure. It's an area of around 5.5 hectares in the middle, which isn't a great huge site. But nevertheless, Danebury itself tells a story that is a microcosm of Ironburg in Germany and the Vic site, which is southwest of Paris, that we did last week. So Danebury itself is, again, very similar to the site in Germany and France that was abandoned. But this was not abandoned in the 400 years BC. The height of this site was around 400 years BC. And the site was then abandoned for most of its occupants around 100 years BC. But one family continued living here. So here are the stats. The interesting stats. Whenever we talk about the Iron Age, we're not really sure where the bodies went in lots of cases. But at Danebury, we've got a very good idea. The remains of at least 300 individuals have been found at Danebury in storage pits. These were once storage pits, and then bodies were placed into them. But most of the bodies found at Danebury are incomplete skeletons. So you find skeletons without a head, you find skeletons without arms, you find heads and arms. There's very much a mixture of bodies found. And some people might believe that this is practice of disarticulation, some kind of practice which isn't cannibalism, because there are no signs of cannibalism on the bones. But also what we do find is out of the 300 individuals that we find seemingly buried here in a disarticulated way, 40 of them are complete and in various states of whatever. And what I mean by whatever, some show signs that they may have been killed or the bodies dissected for various reasons. If the bodies were exposed in some places, that's why they're disarticulated. As I got very graphic last night, saying, well, that Uncle Cecil's been lying around for a little bit, hasn't he? What have we got left of him? We got a skull, we got a humerus, and we got a femur. The rest of his bones have been taken away by the birds and feasted upon. We're going to gather the bones together and we're going to put them in a pit. Good idea, because the body's been exposed and various animals may have feasted on the body. Naturally, that's where lots of the smaller bones are gone. Didn't really think this practice actually happened in the Iron Age, but it probably most definitely did. However, we do find bodies that may have been collected after some kind of dispute over varying different times, and people who may have wished themselves to be sacrificed in the previous storage pits that had once held grain or various vegetables and fruit. Now, I don't know if any of you follow me on my YouTube. I know Henry does, but we had a pumpkin which we had bought all the way back in October last year, which is 6 months ago, at the beginning of October. This pumpkin itself, when we cut into it, was as fresh as the day as if we would have eaten it back in October. And the point I'm trying to make is if you store food in the right way, they can last a very, very long time. So whenever I'm given an impression about the Iron Age, you usually think that the grain is all they depended on over the long winter months. But if you're able to store fruit and veg in the correct way, obviously not pumpkins, because Iron Age people in Britain didn't have pumpkins. But if you store them in the right way, you can keep fruit and veg for months and months and months and months. And that's what they may have stored in some of these storage pits. So this site itself is a site that those that have passed on are buried amongst the living. Because when a storage pit is no longer used, what we're going to do is we're going to reoccupy it with something. And what better than a human body? Storage pits themselves were usually used for 1, maybe 2 seasons at the most. And the problem is with these storage pits, the good thing is they're cut in chalk. So if they get anything inside gets damp, it soon sort of is absorbed by the chalk. And you'd probably tap these over with clay to try and stop the moisture getting in. The one thing about storing grain in these for more than 1 season is that ergot. And if ergot disease then affects your grain, it goes through all the grain. So you're eating your grain, and the next day you wake up after a loaf of bread that's got the ergot bacterium, you might go along and start feasting your loved ones. Or you might go up and down killing everybody. So ergot is not the wisest thing to actually obtain in the Iron Age. And there's no real cure for it. You just go absolutely insane. So when people talk about zombies and stuff and people eating people, now you know where that comes from. So you've got an idea how big these pits are. There's little Annie there. She's finished excavating in a pit. And usually what they found in these pits, other than human remains, is job zero. So again, thinking about the site and sort of getting a good sort of picture on it and the storage pits. Oh, and said body, a body amongst the 40 complete ones out of the 300 that we found on the site. So in some of these pits, you're going to get an idea that some of these pits are actually a big size, can't you? They're not small. And this has been taken at an angle that's the top of somebody's deadlocked head. But you've got like sort of a good idea of what's going on around the site. I'm getting an idea of scale that some of these are just some of those there. The little ones are post holes. So lots of storage pits amongst the centre of the site, and the places where people lived was usually around the side of the site. Remember, they've excavated, we know about, not excavated them all, but 70 odd roundhouses and hundreds of buildings that were rectangular or square. So bodies being found in these storage pits, whole bodies deposited soon after death, before the flesh had decayed. So in other words, you're not going to get a complete body like this if you allowed it to decay. Frankly, you're not. Partial body burials within these pits, some of the 300, were probably left out a little bit. You left Eric outside the other week, yeah? He's dead. You're dragging him along, your head falls off, fingers fall out, So that's a partial body burial. And then what you do find amongst all these, we're going to have a look at these later on. Amongst all of these, you have a number of partly disarticulated bones, all stuffed in a pit together. So in here, in particular, we know of 25, and these come up a little bit later, right, in the charnel pit. This was never started off to store bodies. This was started off to store grain. And that comes in to answer a question from maybe about a year ago, or maybe longer. When we were talking about the Neolithic period, and we weren't exactly sure what they were doing with the burial chambers. This is the answer. So burial chamber used for something else, and later they use it for burial. So these chambers use it for burial. So in other words, these holes in the ground once started off to store grain, and then they are places, charnel pits, where human bodies are placed. So do you see the link there? So in other words, your archaeologists excavating here, maybe initially, may have thought, right, these are burial pits, right? Well, they weren't. They didn't start off with burial pits. They were actually, pits that we used for grain. It's the same thing as that you're going down the street, and there's a mosque, right? So originally that started off as a police station. Then it was converted into a house, and there was a mosque there. Welsh chapel in the valleys. That's now a corner shop. So, but you can't. For example, nobody's going to argue that the police station had always been a mosque when it was built in 1895, right? But people expect us to argue that this was always a place of burial when it wasn't. It was actually a place to store grain. So this is when you've got to be very careful when you're trying to understand the past. Now, there was an important point which slightly gets your mind into another mindset, but it's a very interesting mindset. Have you ever wondered why these things have survived over 2,000 years? Have you ever wondered that there's over 5,000 of these things? Have you ever wondered how castles survive? Have you ever wondered how Roman walls survive? Right. The reason why I asked that question, think of it in living memory, in our living memory, not somebody watching this who was born in 2000, but in our living memory, all of us bumped into a First World War veteran. Most of us will be aware of a place that was associated with the First World War. I've been to West Wales and seen where the troops practiced trench warfare. Some of you may have been to Flanders or Ypres or Mons in France, Belgium, and you get one or two trench systems, and the rest of the landscape is now a field. Yeah. And many of the big craters that once existed across battlefield sites in the First World War are no longer there. The trench systems are completely disappeared, right? Why is that? When in fact that's in living memory, and these things are still there after 2,000 years. I don't want you to answer that question. I wanted to put that in your minds, to try and understand how important finding these things can be. Now, what we find is that we get bodies of varying different ages, and we get bodies which are 0 age, 45 and beyond. And what we do find very, very interesting in charnel pit, the 25 remains in here all date between the age 14 and 35, and they're all male. Now, I don't want you to think about this in the usual way, right? What I want to do is basically say, why are they all male when we live in a matriarchal society in Iron Age Britain? That is an interesting point. Why are there no sets of female remains in here? Again, we're not answering that question, but again, I wanted to put that little worm in your heads. So when we go back to looking at little bits like that, and not this body in all these holes, you get some of these holes with just a couple of heads in, and maybe a few arms in another one, right? But when you look at the bones in some of these pits, other than this one, right, which they're related to, in lots of the other pits, there's no signs of any violence, which is a bit odd. So, in other words, they did leave their loved ones scattered around the landscape, but probably they were too busy to bury them. You know, I know that sounds a bit nuts. Oh, come on, Carl, you're talking crop there. But I mention that because I have been out like you guys, wandering around countryside and stuff, and you come across a dead, rotting sheep. Yeah, and you might come across a stack of dead horses. Yeah, I've come across all these things. And you're thinking, well, why has nobody buried these things? Right? They're just rotting. But it's probably because people are just too busy. And maybe a body's been left exposed because they're waiting for a pit to be emptied so they can put a body in there. This may sound hugely insane, but it's not as insane as we think. You leave a body exposed on a rock, or you leave a body exposed sort of over in that field where nobody goes for a couple of months, right? The body's rotted away, the smell goes, you collect the bones, the job work's been done, and you bury the bones. But this is something else that occasionally comes up. I want to, in a way, I've been trying to arm yourselves with all of these things when you come across somebody talking about the Iron Age. So, the religion thing, the sort of coin thing, the burial thing, the fighting thing, the matriarchal, the patriarchal thing, town, fort, farmsteads, all these different things, right? But headhunting. So what they have found is evidence of some heads, right, that have got wounds on them associated with this here, and maybe associated with some two tribes go to war, one is all that you can score. Is this what going on at Danebury? But it says Danebury East Gate, right? For a time, they decided not to have a gateway at Danebury. So you would think if they fighting all the time, they'd have a gateway there. Interesting, that one. But anyway, right? Sometimes I struggle with this headhunting thing, because we have seen examples where heads have been collected, actually of your loved ones, and they have then been carried around. Or the example I used to use, and I still use if I was doing the Neolithic period. Yeah, you've got like a causewayed enclosure. Yeah, I'm trying to make comparisons here. So you've got a causewayed enclosure, and there's a sky burial area in the middle, and you expose a body. And after 3 months, when the harvesting's done and your animals, are nicely ready for the winter, you might go in there and say, "Oh, right, I'll go and collect Uncle Derek's skull, or Fanny Craddock's skull from the middle of the site." Right? So you go and get good old Fanny, and you get her skull, and you think, right, okay, as we prepare the fields now for the next year, try and sort out a little bit of hedging and that type of stuff. A bit of coppicing, a bit of laying, all that type of stuff, which you might leave for the later months, or depends, which part of the country you're on. You might sort of do some gorsing or whatever. There's no real science to this. And you think, well, okay, I want you looking out at us. So you get good old Fanny, and you got a sharp spike, right? And you go, look, Fanny, bang. The spike, the sharp spike goes through Fanny's skull. She's looking out at you, doing your farming activity. She's with you in society, right? Now, we do the same thing, all of us. We have photographs of loved ones that pass away, and we look at them. We might have something on the wall that reminds us of somebody very special in our lives, right? Now, I'm not saying any of us has a skull there, right? But that's the same as, it's morbid to look at a photograph of somebody that's passed away. I don't think it bloody is. It keeps them alive, but some people might say it's morbid. And it's morbid to have a skull looking out at you. But then again, if you want to keep connected to that person, do you see what I mean? So it's not all about headhunting cult and stuff, It's not. So what they did find amongst all this bone tat was they found 211 isolated bones were found. Mostly they had a collection of long bones, and they were mainly the long bones of the humerus and the femur from the right hand part of the body. Don't ask what that means. I have no idea. It's just so odd, right? But this is the point. We're talking about bones when we haven't really been talking about bones, associated with the good old Iron Age. Anyway, sorry, I shouldn't have moved from there. But what these basically show you, they found 5 bits of skull associated with 5 separate heads, and they showed signs that the heads had been smashed by a weapon. Right now, was this done post-mortem, or was the person alive when the damage was caused to the skull? And it's very difficult to work that out when you've got fragmentary evidence like this. And naturally, if you smash through a skull and that person just died, right? How
Gonna be
are you going to
messy.
know? Hang on, how are you going to know if that's associated with somebody dying in battle? The person may have just dropped dead, and you decide to get angry and cut them up. And basically, I've got a message off Goff saying about Hallstatt Chapel. And you can tell us a little bit more about that in the break. What were you going to say, Anne? You're going to just said something about that.
Oh, I was going to say it would be messy.
Yes.
They look so white, and pure, but if they'd only just died, they wouldn't be like that.
Hang on a minute, Anne. What do you mean?
I don't know what you mean, really.
And these are bits of bone that have been lying in the ground for 2,000 to 300 years, right?
Oh, right, yeah.
Oh my God, Anne! You thought there was still going to be blood on him? Oh my God! Go outside the room.
No, I thought they were old, but you said, oh, just think if these were people who just died and you decided to chop their heads off, they'd be messy, wouldn't it? It'd be a lot messier than that.
It's messy, but that was thousands of years ago.
No,
Yes,
it's asking us to imagine, and I can.
yeah. Well, imagine there's blood on it, right? Okay, Anne. Oh my God! Oh my giddy Anne! I cannot believe you just said that. Hang on a minute. Oh no!
I'm gonna have to go to the
I've lost the plot so much now that I've actually put myself back on. So what you're saying, Anne? Right? You expect loads of blood to be on these things now, do you?
No.
Well, that's what it sounded like.
Well, perhaps we just had a misunderstanding there. I'm sorry.
No way. But okay. Anyway, what?
It's all right. I think it was a bit of a quip, that I put in there.
Right. Anyway, Goff, yeah. If I type in a Hallstatt a channel house, will it come up straight away?
Yeah, that's what the pictures are.
Yeah. But by the way, Goff has sent me this, right, and you can put it a bit more in context, right? This is why we do the technology, right? Yeah. Can you remember that lecture I did in Lanswick Major in a packed room um about pornography in the Roman period, Goff?
I'd rather not talk about it.
Yeah, I don't think we should. And there were people in the room looking stuff up on their mobiles. Now this is this is a channel house, right, in Austria. Now, Goff, can I just ask you, Goff, how do they know that this is 2,000 years old, or what's going on here?
Well, it's not 2,000 years old, but what it points at, Hallstatt, as you know, is the sort of place where all the Celtic things started.
Ah, yeah.
And,
I see.
and even today, they don't bury people there. The last set of bones put in that charnel house was in 1947.
Oh, yeah.
So it's continued, the sort of thing has continued from thousands of years ago right up to the present time, really, in Hallstatt itself. Yeah.
That's absolutely amazing. And look at those skulls.
Yes. And all the bones there's packages of the bones with the heads so they can get them all in. So it's like a bundle of the human bones.
Oh, it's horrible. But I think we got one in London, haven't we?
Oh,
Well,
there's lots of examples. Yeah. But it's just what it was so interesting is it's in Hallstatt, which is where basically the people that we're talking about in Wiltshire is where their sort of ancestors came from.
And these have actually got bloody names on them.
But I'm sorry, they haven't got blood on them.
They're a lot older than in Rome. I forgot what they're called now. Catacombs.
The catacombs, yeah.
Yeah.
So
they're a lot older.
Yeah.
That technique survived, doesn't it, Carl? Bones. Yeah. It's amazing.
They were reverent. They were revered.
The thing is, I think, well, exactly. Anyone buried in a burial ground is revered. But the point is that it's the process of the whole thing. Now, obviously, they're not going to be exposing Dietrich in 1946 on top of a hill, right? So there must be a certain level of burial, and it'd be interesting to know how long these bodies were buried until they then dug them up to actually put them in here. And there is an issue there, and I think we've sidelined a minute, but there is an issue. Can you remember in Victorian Britain, right? If you dug up somebody, you'd be classed as a body snatcher, right? But in Austria, it was the thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I see. I'm with you. I'm with Goff on that now. Yeah, I'm with it. So yeah, this practice has continued. The only difference is that there's a building now. Goff has actually hit us with a little bit of evidence now, right? So when Goff has actually challenged me, and well, he does it. It is a good challenge, actually. If they're doing it today, right? Which is not magnificent. It's benevolent. You're doing it for good reasons today, right? So if you're finding these things in the past, why can't we say it was a genuine thing that they did, and there's no nastiness in it at all. So I think all of that needs to be thought about, and the other thing as well is that we don't think of is accidental death. For example, I know this is going to be rare, but somebody's wandering along and they trip over and they slice their arm off because they've fallen on an axe, or somebody's chucked an axe across the field, and you know what I mean. We just because it's not going to happen often, is it? But we always think that there's something malevolent and nasty about all these things that we find in the ground. And then Goff gives us an example. It's the type of thing that he did anyway. So, and the other thing as well is, just because you obviously, if you've got a skull wound like this, it's gonna kill you. But if you've got an arm that looks like it's been cut through with a sword, if there's signs that it's healed and the person didn't die from their wounds, and you've got all these different things that you can actually think about. So is this based on anything? Is there anything to say about something like this? And we've got to be very careful about interpreting the past and understanding it in a logical, educated way. So what I did last night, I basically I looked at a little bit of detail, and I think we moved on to look at temple-like structures, and then we had a little bit of a break and we actually come to it. So that gives you an idea where Danebury is. South of Andover, northwest of Winchester, and northeast of Salisbury, and north of Southampton. And look how big some of these storage pits are. They are absolutely
We can't see anything.
massive.
No.
What?
We can't see anything. We're not on.
I can see it.
You can see it.
I can see it.
I can see.
I can't. Oh. No,
He needs to come to my house then.
Yeah, and me.
Hang on a minute. Why can't you see, Goff?
I can't see the map. I can only see
You're
all
not
of
showing
you.
a map. There's
What?
a map.
Yeah, but I can't see it. All I can see is you folks.
Oh, oh,
I see the map.
Hang on a minute. Let's just do one. Right. Right. Okay. Here we go. Right. There's me. There's me. But by the way, my hair is like that next week when I'm acting. Right. So what we're gonna do?
we're
Flock
gonna.
of seagulls. Right. Anyway. Right. Here we go. Right. Now, can you see it?
Yes. Yes, now I can, yeah.
Oh, good.
That's good. That's good. That's good. That's good. I don't. Now I don't. Goff, you interrupted me then, right?
Yeah, sorry.
Unlike Anne.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, Anne never apologizes. Maybe she should take a leaf out of your book.
Oh,
Anyway,
aw.
look at the massive storage pits. Anyway, let's go. Let's straight down to the Endies. So Danebury itself, just over 5 hectares in area. Barry Cunliffe excavated, 1969 all the way to 1988. Right, and Danebury is an amazing site that has been one of those archaeological sites in Britain that's been extensively archaeologically excavated. And again, Danebury itself is been rebuilt, and sometimes the gateways have got a gate on it, other times it hasn't. And how do we know that? Because if you look at the archaeology in the ground, you say, right, hang on, there's no evidence of any posts here for like 50, 60, 70 years, right? And there's no evidence that these posts held a gate, right? Because they've done the archaeology and they've excavated the 2 entranceways. And there's one time that there was no gateway, even though they were living there. So if this is a defensive site, right? Why have they got no gateway at times on the site? It's a bit like Frankie Howard, isn't it? Come on, boys! Don't attack here. Oh yeah, we got to attack at the other entranceway with a gateway. Don't go this way. It's an open exit, boys. Let's go over to the front. And they're battling away there, right? You know, just think about it, right? If you got an area where there's no gateway, right? How can it be defensive? right? The gate's just left open. There's nothing. There's no barrier, right? So I think that that's really, really interesting and a really, really interesting point, right? And then we start thinking, that there's this like there's this time that we've got interpretation here. So last week I've just basically mentioned that people used to think this was a medieval site. Then they used to think it was a Roman site, hence the name fort. Then they thought this was a place of King Arthur, right? You know, but then eventually they undertook an excavation here. The first one, they dabbled here in 1859. And when they were dabbling here there's Barry Cunliffe there, ideal man for Anne. When they were excavating here, in the hang on a minute, I've lost the plot. When they were excavating here um in 1859, Barry Cunliffe wasn't excavating here in 1859, by the way. But basically, when he was excavating in 1859, an archaeologist was excavating at the site. The archaeologist whose name, a great name, is Augustus Wollaston Franks, he found a pit like this, and the pit itself was 2 meters deep, and it was 1.5 meters in diameter, so actually smaller than this. And basically, he didn't find anything in it, and he thought, "It's a bit odd. There's nothing in it. It's not a burial. There's no statues of Lloyd George."
That
So,
looks more
you know,
like a grain store.
but he didn't know that when he was excavating here in
No.
1859, you see.
Oh, no.
And the point is that we got hundreds of these being found across the site. So now this is a little bit of interesting education, right? And a little bit of interesting education is not to think about this sort of warring and burials and all the rest of it. Is just think, well, they didn't really do any more excavations here in the 1850s. They only came back in the 1969, right? And there was a stage in the latter part of the 1800s, under the direction of Augustus Pitt Rivers. Yeah, there you go. There's another Augustus, great archaeological name. Who excavated a large number of hill forts in the area of Sussex, which is towards the southeast. And I think I think they may have actually investigated Kisbury Rings. But the one interesting thing is that they didn't excavate this site in the 1920s and the 1930s when there was hill fort mania, only to be replaced by Roman mania. Right, and at which stage we know of about 80 plus archaeological hill fort sites in Britain that have been excavated. So incoming, Barry Cunliffe decided to examine this hill fort, and there he is. Most of what we're seeing here is down to the work of Barry Cunliffe and his little trowel. And basically, what he wanted to do as he's excavating, he wanted to basically excavate the hill fort and actually excavate the surrounding landscape. And that's how we started to realize that these hill forts were not alone. They're in fact part of only a little part of a much bigger landscape where there's dozens and dozens of farmsteads associated with hill fort, bank and ditched enclosures like these. And he was able to excavate the landscape because Hampshire County Council owned the site, and he basically said, "Tell you what, can I do an excavation for a few months of the year?" And he excavated here from 1969 all the way to 1988, a whopping 20 seasons of archaeological excavation, and he excavated 57% of the site. 57% of the site where the remains of 70 odd roundhouses, hundreds of square houses, storage buildings, 4 poster structures for various animals were actually being found and excavated by him. Again, 43% of the site hasn't been excavated. So the one thing that we clearly know, obviously, about this period in time is that we don't have any historical records what was going on at these places. So they could be seen to be used for anything and everything at the same time. Very few hill forts have lots of evidence of people living at them. This is one exception in Britain where we do actually have evidence of people living at them. So this is why I said at the beginning, this is the exception to the rule, and this is why this links in with our Vic site south west of Paris and at Heimberg in southern Germany, because they're odd and different, and this is odd and different, and this has. Hamburg, for example, lots of square buildings and rectangular buildings. This has lots of small square buildings and rectangular buildings. Although this is a very small compared to Hamburg and the Vic site, which is 45 hectares in south west of Paris. Nevertheless, this is a really important site, and it's been remodeled and rebuilt consistently over its period of time in use. And as they're working here, and as they're understanding this site, for example, we know, for example, that the evidence tells us that this is a site dominated with storage pits. This is a site that is dominated by very impressive banks and ditches, like that one. So what they've got is we do believe from the archaeological excavation by Barry Cunliffe that lots of the places where people lived are up against the banking on the inside of the site, right? And here's a little bit of a fact. You're looking at a site like this to be an Iron Age hill fort because the bank is on the inside and the ditch is on the outside. If it's a Neolithic site, like Aveby, and it originally started off as causewayed enclosure 6,000 years ago. Basically, the bank is on the outside and the ditch is on the inside. That's how you can work out the Neolithic. Bob's your uncle. So this site itself is to be seen as, even though it's not massive, this site, if you compare this site with somewhere like Maiden Castle, which is a whopping 50 acres in area. And this is just over 5 hectares in area. So there's 2.5 acres to a hectare, right? So so that means that this site is, hang on, let's just work out the maths. That's 10. That's
a picture.
12.5 acres in area, right? So what?
It's a lovely picture.
It is a beautiful picture. It really, really is. So this is actually not a massive one, but it's sort of the average size for sort of hill forts, even like the ones in the Vale of Glamorgan, for example. Now, do you know what? Last night I was caught out by this next statement. So what we're going to do, we're going to go online. And that's a great picture. We'll go online. There's Baldrick, my full Baldrick. Do you know, we're baby Baldrick's coming on really well, Anne. Really is. Yeah. Hang on. I wanted to do that. I want to type in what we did last night. So what we typed in last night, we typed in Danebury, right? Archaeological images. That's what we did. And we scrolled through it, and then I got excited because I scrolled through and I said, "There's an image that I'm trying to find in Monkshair," and I got through it. Right, okay. So again, I should have copied and pasted this last night. Hang on, is it going to keep going? 1 second. Keep going. Yeah, Danebury. It will come up in a moment, folks. Oh, look at that. This gives you a plan of our Danebury site. And what you're looking at an entranceway. There's one of the entranceway. Was another entranceway. And what this is clearly showing is all the squares there are basically storage buildings. And what you have in the middle, you have these temples, and you have the roundhouses. You have a load of roundhouses in the right-hand corner there, circular things. So most of the roundhouses are on the inside of the banking. So those are roundhouses. You've got roundhouses there. You've got a few in the middle, right? But one thing that is actually important about this is something I've said before. If you put the houses alongside the banking, they're going to be protected from the wind. So that's basically it. Again, I'm still trying to find this image. So what we got, if I type in banking, hopefully I'll find it. Banking. Hopefully I can find it. Be very disappointed if I don't find it now because I had it yesterday. Just let me scroll through a minute. There's so many. Oh, there it is. It's like it's like meeting a new woman. Look at that. I lead a sad life, Goff, right? If I can compare that with a woman, but to me that is orgasmic, right? Because it's layers. Look at the layers. You can see all the layers of the banking. It's absolutely amazing. I'm loving it. Now, initially, when we started looking at this site, right, I do lead a sheltered, sad life. But what we do find is initially when they were building the banking, right, they had posts, and it would be a box, right, and then they would fill, and then they would it would be a certain height, right. So you'd fill up with turfs and all these other things, right? Fill them with turfs. But unfortunately, what's going to happen is after 20 to 30 years, these posts are going to rot. And then what's going to happen is it's quite simple. The banking is going to have a V form situation. They actually gave up after a while and they just allowed it to be a V form situation. But initially, so obviously you look at that there. Hang on a minute. Look at the archaeologists there. So the first phase of the defences was probably about 550 years BC on the 14th of August at 1215. And then eventually what happened, they built it up with like chalk and sods of earth, right? And that's what I stopped last night because I got excited again because I've learned something, right? With sheep farming, right? You learn lots of things. Sheep eat everything, but goats don't. And what do sheep do? They overgraze areas, right? So on what we would call the archaeological site here, right? Which we call the settlement field, that's being grazed really intensely, right? And the sheep are on it now because we've got another field that we're preparing for them, but it's actually full of an endangered type of flower. So then we've got to put that to seed and then we can let the sheep in there, right? But anyway, the long story short is when sheep overgraze, right, you can then cut them into sods, which you can then build a turf bank, you see? Or you can build a Cornish wall. And basically, a Cornish wall is basically stone, sods of earth, stone, sods of earth, stone, sods of earth, and the sods of earth keep the wall together, right? It's called a Cornish wall. But if you're building a sod wall, right? You know, I always used to wonder. I used to watch Time Team, right? And I used to think, how the hell, right? How the hell are they able to build a turf bank when everything's overgrown and but if the land's been grazed, right, by sheepsies, right, you can then cut sods of earth and you can use those sods of earth to create the banking. You see? Anyway, I thought I'd put that in there because that's me learning sheepsies. So what happens is obviously they're digging a ditch and they're using the material to build this and the sods of earth. And it was contained by timber, it was box frame, right? And we get similar things happening to the gateway, but it says after 51 years and 4 months, the rampart was rebuilt in places, right? And they just thought, oh, sod it, we'll just keep piling earth on it. So the way they did this, right? That's the outside there, right? So what they then do, and this is the inside, yeah. What they then do is that they just pile up earth, right? They pile up earth, and they keep piling it up, right? And this creates a layer, and then obviously again pile up earth, and it creates a layer. So in other words, that erodes into here, and actually some of it ends up in the ditch as well, right? So this is this is what's going on with this wonderful site of Danebury, and you can get a good idea of the profile of the ditches. So obviously, so what we're seeing is with the gateway, the first gateway on the eastern side was 4 meters wide, and then it was 9 meters wide, and they got evidence that the gateways at times burnt down, right? But then the east gateway for a period of time was gateless. I think that's a medical condition, but something else. So what we got these various different stages of rebuilding. So we've got the V-shaped profile of the bank, sometimes sort of curved, but V-shaped, and you've got sort of. And then what they did, right? And what we've got to do, we've got to go with an aerial view. One last time, we've got to say goodbye to this image because I absolutely love it. Doesn't that look good? Absolutely amazing, right? Do you know what? I would much prefer to spend the night with an image of that than a woman some days, right? That is just really does it for me. I could stare at that all day. I really could. And even Anne would do the same thing. See, Anne's not just a silly woman. She's a lovely woman who's got the same views as me. So in places, right? That's the gateway. That's the east gateway. Eventually go 9 meters wide, but right. Then, right, listen, I can't really get this in my head, right? I really can't. But they've got evidence that they put a stone wall, a dry stone wall on top of the bank eventually, right? Maybe sometime in, I don't know, sometime in the sort of 350s BC or something like that or whatever. From the top of the height of the wall, right, to the base of the ditch, they've worked out that was an incredible 16 meters drop. And they still didn't have a gateway at times here. What? Does that make sense? Because to me, it don't. We're not in a Frankie Howard sketch now. Do you remember the Frankie Howard sketch? He goes, "No, touch me not. Where's Ivy? I'm here, boys." Anyway, the point is, right? I think I think he actually filmed you as well. But anyway, the point is from the top of here, the dry stone wall, and you got the bank all the way to the ditch, right? They reckon that was a whopping 16 meters, and that is bumtastic. That's unbelievable, right? When me and Pat went to Maiden Castle, after she was all hill forted out, some of those banks and ditches were impressive, weren't they, Pat? Yeah, she agrees. They were really impressive. They really were. Pat, can I make a confession?
Yes.
Do you know why I was so grouchy on that trip?
No.
I didn't tell anyone, but for the 2 nights I slept in the car because I did not have enough money for the accommodation.
Oh.
So yeah, I wanted to share that with you guys. I really did. Anyway, so what else have we got here? So back and loving that image. She's loving it. Look at that. So what we've got, I think after the break we'll talk about the shrines, but I'll introduce the shrines. So you got the bank and ditch enclosure. Got the site being remodeled, rebuilt. There were times that they just couldn't be bothered with the ditch. They just let it fill up. It's likely as well that the population at Danebury was in excess of 300 people at one time. It's one of very few bank and ditched enclosure hill forts that we know of anywhere in Britain that was occupied. So it puts it in par with the sites on the continent. So we've got these four poster structures, right? And the 4 poster simply, right? Not that. The 4 poster structures are simply structures that were raised off the ground, right? And you've got a little bit of a building like that, little doorway, right, with a little bit of a ramp, and that's a 4 poster. And you might put grain in there, right? Or you might put little piglets in there, little piggies with little snout. So again, this site itself, there's lots of phases of build here. You know, there's lots of evidence of post holes. There's thousands of post holes across the site. You know, and there's different phases. You know, in the later stage, you've got shrines, right? At one stage, you've got more pits than anything. And Danebury was probably abandoned around 100 years BC, in common with the trend of lots of hill forts being abandoned across Britain, right? And when there was a gateway on the east gate, they just burned it down at that stage and they never replaced it. And the site was then left over to people, to a small family living at the site. And that's when we actually come in to, this is when we look at this after the break. It's likely that one of the big pits there is the big pit. Not pit, no, and not big pit at Blind Avon. We're not talking about that, right? The big pit here, is that at that time was where they started to find lots of bodies, right, in there. But again, people still lived at the site. So what I'd like to do is I've got to make sure that I've got to make sure that I was going to that I said to him last night, we'll complete Danebury next week in alignment with the other Iron Age sites. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be very cheeky after this and have a cup of barley cup with 2 spoonfuls of sugar, which I shouldn't. And Anne, I'm going to have a donut. Apparently, it was remarked by Michelle at my live show that I must have had a donut on stage, right? And somebody had actually crept a donut in, right? And Michelle was really not happy because I was off my head. And the donut had an effect, apparently.
Oh,
I was donuted out.
it was the yeast. It's the yeast.
It's the yeast.
Yeast.
Can you remember that Czechoslovakian yeast advert? Czechoslovakian yeast, and there's a dog walking upside down on the ceiling. I used to love that.
Yeah, well, there you are. See.
There you are. Right. So what we're gonna do now? We're gonna have a break. I'm gonna put the kettle on. We're gonna have a 15-minute break. But Henri's just joined us, right? And yeah, Henri's
Hello,
just joined us.
Henri.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, hello, Henri. Hello.
Bonjour.
Bonjour, mon
Bonjour.
petit. Bonjour, mon petit fleur. Henry.
Mon petit chou.
No, mon petit fleur. Mon corps resist encore. Scream for more. Right. Anything you want to say, Henry?
No, that's a very interesting site.
It is, and a bit more after the break.
Ooh,
We're going to
right.
do temples. We're going to do temples after the break. We're going to talk about Anne's problem as well.
My broken
I'm not
wrist.
sure I can cope with that, but anyway, carry on.
Well, actually, I must admit I'm so sad because looking at these sites, I'm never going to be able to go to any of these sites again
Oh, Anne, why not?
because I can't drive anymore.
I tell you what, I tell you what, Pat, we'll take her out one day and we'll see some of these. That's what we'll do.
Well, I really, it was great, you know, it was great, the archaeology trips. I got a lot out of those because I don't have anyone to take me anywhere, you know. I got to take them, I got to take people everywhere, but I don't, you know. So
Well, I gotta be honest with you.
the end of an era.
Goff said that he knew you were going to come up with that problem. So Goff said that he will take you to the next film. He'll pick you up and you can go to the next film that he's
And
going
it
to
was
watch.
Chris Gale's birthday
It's Tony
yesterday.
and Trap.
Film.
Right. Okay then. Okay.
I
Anne.
can get to a film.
Yeah. Well, Goff has offered to take you to a film, but you've got to pay. Anything else you want to say, Anne?
No, that's no, it's just you know, it's nice to go to these sites for
Well,
change.
Goff wants to see the next most violent ever war film where terrible things happen to people, right? Really, really violent, and he wants you to go with him.
No, I don't want to go.
Oh, Goff, you won't be able to take her to the cinema now, Goff.
No.
Oh, Goff, I'm so sorry, Goff. I shouldn't have put my foot in it. Sorry, Goff. Pat, anything you want to say?
No, I found it fascinating, all those pits. And the picture, it looks like there's black circles. What are those black circles on the map? All around it.
Oh. Oh.
Which map was that?
That's the one with the thing in the middle. It's just got the circle, the ditches and the banks. And I don't think it's where they dug, because they dug in chalk, didn't they? Pretty much.
Yeah, they did. They dug. Yeah, this is dug out of chalk. Yeah, exactly. It's a and the thing is, chalk is actually really good for storing things in because it's alkaline. And
Yeah.
as you know, alkaline it's
Alkaline.
chalky, and that can sort of deal with bacteria and all sorts of things. So yeah.
Yeah.
Where they decided
Yeah,
to empty, were they in one certain area? They changed them over.
Oh yeah, exactly. What? Yeah, that's right. So you're not gonna basically you might have a few storage pits in use every year, and as seeing as there's hundreds across the site, that would make sense over the period of time the site's been used. And obviously there would be times that they're after maybe 100 years they oh my God, we found another pit and there's a body in it. So we dig into it. Yeah. So
Yeah, thank you.
okay. Okay. Thanks, Pat. Dickie, anything from you?
No, nothing for me. Very interesting.
Right. Okay. What about you, Goff?
Yeah, it was pretty good. Yeah, I like the way you connected the sites up. That was very interesting. Thank you.
They're good connections, aren't they? Good what's the word?
That's the
Comparison.
one, Anne. That's the one.
Comparisons.
Comparisons. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
All right,
Right. Okay.
we go for
Right.
a
We'll have
coffee now.
a 15-minute break, and I'm going to go for a coffee, and we'll be
Yeah.
back, folks. We'll be
Or
back.
a donut. A donut.
You're a bloody donut.
All right, Pat.
All right, yes, hanging in there. Trying to get something done. See you tomorrow.
All right then. I got a nice purple plaster on now.
Oh, good. Oh,
It's just I don't have to use a sling, but I think I have to still keep it raised. So
yeah.
it's not that easy.
Oh, not for 6 weeks.
Did
Oh,
you have a did you break your arm or something once?
no, no. Oh, my
Yeah.
elbow one time. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Didn't even know I'd broken it. They x-rayed and they said, "Did you break your elbow?" And I said, "I don't think so." Because your
Oh,
elbow,
there was a lady there today who broke her elbow.
yeah.
I'll tell you about it. I'll
Okay.
tell you about it tomorrow. I'm gonna make some coffee to
Okay,
try and keep me awake.
yeah,
I mean,
right.
did you want to go out? I mean, are you happy enough to just come and
Yeah,
get your glasses, or did you want to go out?
no, we can just stay in this.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, okay, good,
All
good.
right.
Right.
It's so tiring life, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm good. I was up at the crack of dawn this morning to
Oh,
get
goodness.
hospital. Oh, did you have your injection?
Yes, and I had a heck of a time finding the place. It's around
Oh,
behind the hospital. In the
did you?
There's an eye clinic around the back, the very first building. And so that's where you go. I made my way clear to the front desk, and then they walked me back to the building. Oh God.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's in this separate building that's around the back.
yes.
Yeah, the eye clinic place.
Yeah.
And the
Well, it was in
horrendous.
the ITU. Where was the ITU? It was like
No, it's
around the back.
yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, I'm going to go and make a coffee now.
Me too.
Oh, I need. That's the trouble. It's either my knees or my don't you make the pot of tea or is it make the coffee? If my fingers Very dark. Oh.
Oh, I'm glad nobody's back, so I can have I can have my coffee whilst I wait. Oh, Goff is there. Goff is there. Well, the two gobby ones haven't got there yet, Goff. So,
Two gobby ones.
all right, three gobby ones there. Mm. 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 What? Oh, what's that? Anne's not back yet.
Mhm.
Have any of you ever watched the Jack Hargreaves stuff?
No.
No, it's great. I love it. He tells he tells lots of the history about the sort of Wiltshire and Dorset and stuff.
Is it black and white, is it?
No, it's not actually. It's in colour.
Must be
Going back a bit now.
What's that?
It's going back a bit. Oh, Jack
No, it's in
Agri.
colour. It's in colour. Oh, come on, Anne.
I'm in trouble with the coffee with one arm.
Oh yeah, one arm Dan.
Well,
Oh, balls. Let's get going. I can't wait forever for her. Come on. Oh, there she is. Come on, Anne. Get on with it.
I'm disabled. I only got one hand.
Well,
I have to go to the toilet.
Oh yeah, we really want details. Goff does anyway.
Oh,
Well, hang on. Goff was reminiscing in the break. He said that he would have loved for you to have been in a Lantwick major class. You'd have got on really well with a couple of people in a Lantwick major class. He said.
would I?
Yeah, there was a guy in the Lantwick major class called Jim.
Yeah, I heard about Jim. Not all too favourable, really.
Yeah, and he was a bit of a total knob, but that's life. Right, so we're going to talk about something that we haven't really talked about, shrines. So next week we're going to be finishing off Iron Age hill forts forever. Well, not really, but then we're going to start to sort of get to the very end of the Iron Age and just move on to the Roman era, and yeah, that's what we're going to do. So, Anne, that's good. Quiet, good, Anne. It's good for you to be quiet. So, in the centre, right, of Danebury Rings, right, and interestingly enough, around here, right, and interestingly enough, that you can actually see like a path going through there. Like that path itself isn't a completely modern concept. In fact, that's sort of the same alignment that there was a path 2,400 years ago. Isn't that great? Because down there on the right hand side is actually the entranceway. So there it is. There's the entranceway. There it is. It was originally 9 meters wide. That was. So let's just crack on, and let's just get straight down to our underwear, and we're going to look at these buildings. Rather interesting, these, and look at that. So what it is, you've got these temple-like structures which are built on top of all these grain storage silos in the ground, and one or two round houses. There's one that says ditch there, and there's another ditch there. So Barry Cunliffe was excavating year 1969 to 1988, and one of the areas of excavation, yes, was in fact these 5 buildings in the middle, and rectangular, square-like buildings. We do know if anything like this had been excavated in good old Germany or France at Heimberg or the Vic site, that these would be interpreted as habitational buildings because there's a lot of them. But here, the ones in the middle, we do believe were shrines. And
what?
Shrines.
Oh, shrines. Oh, right, yeah.
What did you think I said?
I don't know.
Shrines.
I don't know. Swines.
No, shrine. Oh, shut up, you silly woman. Shrines. Oh, I can't. Oh, shut up. Religious bloody things. Anyway.
Yes.
All that can be safely said about these buildings is that they're a little bit of a group, right? And what you do find, and actually, is that there? What you do find? Have I got the image? Why don't I get the image? There's something I want to show you. They've done a reconstruction of these shrines on the internet, right? And if you just type in Danebury, right, which we've got here, and we type in Danebury shrines. Oh God, I can't even say it now. Danebury shrines. Shrines. Good. Shut up. Danebury shrines. Right, and it should come up with a reconstruction. No, shrines. Hang on a minute. Oh, there was a reconstruction around here somewhere. Where there, look at that. That's how they think these buildings look like. And there's Anne there. She's got
Oh.
she's got the one with the red hair. Now, this might be of a bit of an exaggeration, right? And they believe that 3 of the 5 buildings were up at any one time. Yeah. And you're just thinking that these were in the middle of the site and that they dominated the middle of the site and they had some kind of enclosure fence around it, right? And it's likely that the bigger post holes in the area, not the pits in the ground, but the bigger post holes in the area were probably totem poles. Now, I don't know if you can remember the good old cowboys and Indians from the
Yeah.
1950s, and you can go.
Oh,
The Cowboys and Indians films from the 1950s and 60s, where they had all these totem poles everywhere, didn't they? Right.
yeah.
Um,
Wow.
and when we talk about totem poles in Britain, they're exactly the same thing. They had carvings on them. They had images of Lloyd George, all sorts of things. And we know about these totem poles, even though most of them haven't survived. When they were excavating for wind turbines in the Maddy Valley in Rhondda, right? They actually found 5 bits of timber that were well over 5,000 years old, and these bits of timber had notches and carvings on them, and again totem poles, right? So we do know that they existed, right? So that's a nice bit of a reconstruction. So going back to these buildings, right? If we go back to these buildings, right, we go back to the images, right, and we go to there. Anne sent me a message to do the Indian thing again, but I'm not going to. Anyway, the one weird thing about those cowboy and Indian films, it wasn't until in the 60s that they actually got proper Native Americans to play Native Americans, because they were actually paid by white people at that stage who actually browned themselves up, which is absolutely terrible. They wouldn't get away with that now, which is terrible. They should have used Native Americans to begin with. Anyway, the point is with these sites is that that path there is the same alignment where there's the modern path, and it's almost as if there's an ornamental path going across the site and has been there for a very, very long time. That's what the archaeology says. Now, if we go to here, right, and what you can see is that that shrine itself is that shrine number RS2. Right. And basically it's this building here. Now that's after it's been excavated. There's these when I say slots in the ground, what it is, they're basically bits of timber that have been put in the ground, right? To then be used to support the rest of the building, right? So what you would have is you'd have these big chunky bits of timber in the ground. Yeah, not that. These big bits of timber in the ground, yeah, bit of an entranceway here. And then these bits of timber in section would have a post in them, right? And on the outside, you would put planks, right? And then that would basically be what this was. Yeah, got it. I'm glad that illustration was really good for you guys. But so you got an idea what they look like. And we get this sort of from other archaeological sites that we've excavated in Britain and elsewhere. So all these buildings are probably constructed in the same way as they excavated them, and they're built directly on top of existing pits, right? So that's a really interesting point. So when they were excavating, they obviously found the fill in these. There you go. That's called fill. The brown stuff is called fill. Not Phil Collins, but fill as in soil, right? And then what they've then got is that they've got this plan here, right? And this itself is where they took all the stuff out. And at one stage, what's happened is that as the timber's rotted away, there's chalk and rubble that is ending up in these holes in the ground. So that's what we're saying. It's really good preserved evidence that they've actually excavated across this chalky vista, this chalky plain. So the simplest explanation of what's going on here from this is that the soil represents the position where the ends of thick timber planks had once stood, packed tightly into the positions by the chalk rubble, or they had been stood up to create the structure on top of an existing timber in these trenches. So basically, the timbers had finally rotted, soil washed in all the crap and rubbish, and it's very likely that, in all intents and purposes, these had gable roofs with timber roofs with reeds or thatch, and obviously underneath those reeds or thatch, there would have probably been a membrane of skins to stop the worst of the rain getting in. And what we do have is the archaeological evidence doesn't only just show that we've got these types of structures being found, for example, at Danebury, but as you can see there, the one in the middle, there's one being found at Cadbury Castle in Somerset. There's also been found a similar one that's been found at Heathrow with work at Heathrow. You can get an idea of scale. So the biggest one at our Danebury site is roughly about 8 meters in diameter, which is quite a sizable site. So the small one that we've been looking at here is just under or around 5 meters in diameter. So these archaeological sites themselves, when they excavated them, what makes them temples, right? Well, they're unusual and in the middle of the site, and it's said that from the entranceway, these things could be seen like a false horizon. You could see them there. They weren't at the tallest point, but you could actually see them there, right? So when they've excavated the archaeological evidence for us to see, they're not normal domestic buildings. And why? There's no hearth in the middle, so nobody lived in them. So that's one point. Are there signs that of any heavy animals' hooves on there that have broken up the surface? No. So they're not used for storing animals. So are there loads of bits of bone and pottery in here? No. Are there any objects found in here at all? No. So in other words, these buildings are very different than habitational buildings, buildings for storing animals, grain, tools. Are they for metalworking? No, there's none of that. So obviously, when you've got rid of the obvious evidence, as Sherlock Holmes would say, what is the most improbable is probably what these buildings were actually used for, right? No, they weren't used to store alien artifacts, right? But other than that, it's likely these 5 buildings, right, were at one stage used as some kind of shrines, right? And or a place of contemplation. Why not? I went to a place called Scandra, which is in West Wales recently, right? And they've got loads of temples, and I remember just wandering around the place, and it was just like really, really odd. And they've got 2 elephants, and it just sort of reminds me of that sort of an area in the middle of the Danebury site, which is used for meditation, contemplative. We always think it's like ritual, but it's not. It's like I think we're connected to that side of us. We really, really are. So again, looking at that, sort of getting an idea. We're doing pretty well for time actually tonight. Pat, we won't be going on till our bars tonight.
Good.
Because Pat's Anne's a bit tired, right? She wants to get ready for your sort of event tomorrow, looking around Primark for new tops. So it's not that funny, Anne. Right. So the next thing I wanted to put this in there. This is about Danebury as well. And then we'll do a little bit more information about Danebury, and then we'll just say sweet Fanny Adams, and we'll call it a day, and we'll look forward to next week. So right, this article. So the one thing about archaeology is that we're re-examining evidence all the time, right? And we're just re-looking at it. So here's a few facts that missed everybody last night. Okay, so here's a few facts. Let's just chuck an image on there. So evidence suggests the site enclosed all 5.5 hectares or just under that, enclosed 73 roundhouses, 2 statue platforms for Lloyd George, 500 rectangular buildings, and thousands of deep storage pits. Thousands of them, not just 10, but thousands of deep storage pits. 2-3 meters deep, some of these storage pits. So grain or whatever they were storing on there was very, very important. It does make you wonder a little bit. When they say 300 people were living there, right, and they're trying to store all this stuff, maybe that's just a bit of an overestimate, because it's like, you know, you're going to need, right, okay, you've got a storage pit in the ground, right? You're going to need to access it the following year, right? So if you're living on top of the storage pit, right, how are you going to get access to it? And it's likely that there were structures on top of the storage pits, you know, for to keep them dry and stuff. So maybe it's a bit of an overestimate that but you know, that we've got people living there. So if you've got thousands of storage pits, I don't know how many thousand, but say it's 2,000, and you were living, and the site was occupied to its fullest for 400 years, right? So you divide 400 into 2,000, right? Quick mathematics, is that 20 storage pits a year full of grain? Is that right? If not, but you're looking at a substantial amount of storage pits every year, and a lot of grain and a lot of fruit and a lot of veg stored in these huge storage pits. You know? So also the other thing as well is, if you've got too many people living there, right, the food's not going to last very long either. So think about it, folks. Think about it. So thanks, Anne. I'm glad you agree, right? Anne, you're the only sensible one tonight who actually agrees with everything I'm saying, right? Anne, am I absolutely wonderful?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. Leave it there. If I asked Goff that, he would say, but Henry wouldn't. Anyway, so the circular houses were for people, and the store buildings and pits held grain naturally. And the pits were dug from the chalk using basic tools. And again, abandoned 100 years BC. Maybe, some people say, it might have been some kind of disease that spread across the landscape. And people in close proximation can use these places, the animals, anthrax, and all the rest of it. Or maybe it's more about the fact that people are starting to think in a different way. Remember, about 50 years later, 50 years before the birth of Christ, you got the emergence of sort of tribal landscapes and tribal people, you know. So that's all to be said, right? And I'm glad nobody mentioned it this week. I got a bit bored of it. People going on about an underground complex underneath Stonehenge, and I keep saying I've known about that for years. In fact, Herodotus wrote about it in 450 years BC. Get over it. So now, when you read this article, this is one of that does not link with the text, right? When it says one of 25 bodies found in an Iron Age pit, it's wrong. That's there. The 25 is referring to that there, and that is actually one of the people. See how they get things wrong in the newspaper? That's one of the people who's not been sacrificed, absolutely perfect, been placed into a pit in the ground. That's one of the 40 bodies out of the 300 that's been placed into the ground like that. These are the ones here. These are the 25 that have died in a horrific way. Right. Actually, that image from the 1970 looks pretty good. That's why they've used it. But that's not what they're referring to. But again, it's somebody, it's a person. And again, that person was placed into a pit who was loved and cherished. Right. And again, more of these full skeleton. Now, they got that right. Full skeleton, Danebury, Hillfort. Now, actually, I think, is that, no, yeah, you can see the side of the pit there, right? But I'm told that there's one of these in the local museum that you can actually see at oh God, no, is it Ashton? Oh yeah, wherever this is. Anyway, the point is, right, you've got 25 bodies there. And again, this sort of adds to what we've already said. Now, a little bit more information. So this is dated 2019, right? It was released on the 1st of April. Nah, I'm only joking. The 30th of October 2019. And it says, from what they can work out, most of these in here were young men. There's evidence that some of them would have been tied. There's evidence that some of them have been mutilated before they had just been tossed into the mass grave. Now, when they examined the bones, they saw that lots of these individuals, maybe as a 15-year-old, 20-year-old, the oldest ones in here are 35. Um, um, some were perfectly healthy, but some actually showed signs of disease and disability. So then you've got to work out the ones that showed signs of disease. Did they die from a disease, and then the body was cut up and chucked in the pit? Right. It might be right. He's unclean. That one, he's unclean. Right. We're gonna cut him up and chuck a odd limb in there. It's a Monty Python sketch. Go on, kick the head in there. Go on, bang. Yeah, yeah. The head ends up on your toe and it's biting you. But the point is that some may have actually died naturally, and then they were just disarticulated. So the work is ongoing looking at this, and basically they're talking about they found a bath-shaped pit, a large bath-shaped pit. Professor Sir Barry Cunliffe, an archaeologist at the University of Oxford, said during an episode of Mystic Britain, a Mystic Britain you can actually find on YouTube. So right in the centre, and what we have found is not only that they find lots of pelvises, right? They found lots of broken pelvises. There you go. There's a broken pelvis, and there is Barry Cunliffe. Right?
Oh,
Well, she's
my
bloody
friend,
tall.
my
Isn't she?
friend's got a broken pelvis.
Look at the size of her. She's huge.
Yeah.
She's towering over him. I tell you what, Anne. Right? Can you remember that Tina woman? She was much taller than me. Yeah, we'll leave that one. So it looks like this pelvis had been deliberately broken, right? And it looks like that lots of these pelvises and femurs had been deliberately broken and they're just tossed into the hole in the ground. They're saying that there's evidence that some of the people who have been tossed into the ground before that, they had their legs chopped off at the top of the femurs and then slashed through the middle of the body through the soft part. They took the pelvis area out of the body and placed it um, in different parts of the pit. So it's really odd. It's really odd bit of archaeology, and it doesn't tie in with anything that we've discussed, right? So there he is. He's discussing that with anthropologist Mary Ann Okota. And this was part of the documentary that you can, as I say, you can probably find on YouTube. And I'll give you the title again. It's called Mystic Britain. But it's an episode of Mystic Britain that was aired in 2019. But if you look up Danebury, you'll be able to find it. Again, reiterating, Barry Cunliffe says they chopped the legs off at the top and the femurs and then slashed through the middle of the body, through the soft part. They took the pelvis area out of the body and placed it in the bottom of the pit in some cases. Marks on the bones suggest the attackers didn't neatly carve the body in two, but hacked it to pieces. So, is this a ritual hacking? You know, when we look at the Iron Age, we've got lots of bog bodies, haven't we? In Ireland, we've got them in Denmark, we've got them at Lindo Moss, and other parts of Europe and northern Germany as well. And what we do see is ritualistic stuff going on, and maybe this is ritualism. Maybe they're ritualistically doing things with the body. Now, as you know, I disagree with this. When it says the inhabitants of Danebury lived during a violent time in Britain in which the country was ruled by tribes led by warrior kings. I don't go with that. It's not what I go by, but I needed to share that with you. And then again, nice little Danebury fort. Where's the other image of the femur? There was another image of a femur. I know. I'll just zoom into that one. Just makes it easier. There we go. And again, the femur's been torn apart. It's been hacked. They've really broken into these bodies, and the bodies are still flesh when they're doing it, Anne. Right? And when you think about it, if they're ritualistically doing this to the bodies, they're destroying the bodies, they're smashing them up, they're making them unusable for the gods. It's almost as if a sacrifice, it's almost a big sacrifice. So the pits where the bodies were found was used to store seed grain for each year's harvest. seed grain was vitally important to the life of the community, and it would have been. It's huge. But I'm also, you know what, folks? I'm always aware that there's this absolute massive obsession with grain when we talk about the Iron Age, and there's a huge obsession when we talk about grain in any other period. Yeah, it's massively important. So are the animals, which we don't really talk much about. But I'm thinking about fruit because when I don't know how many of you guys, you're going down the road and there's like loads of apples everywhere, right? You're thinking, why aren't anyone picking these up? Living around here, you get that. And I'm thinking, well, if you've got crabapple trees, right? Look at the amount of crab apples you can collect, right? And you put them in a big pit. That's gonna be really good for your diet over the winter months, right? So you put these in a big pit. You mix a bit of sand in there. Layer it. Layer it. And you might come across, the odd pulses. You loads of beans. You don't want to store beans up above the surface because you can have loads of mice and rats. You want to put them in a big pits in the ground. And you've got things like Swedes. No potatoes, Anne. There's no potatoes at this stage. Or no tomatoes. But we don't actually talk enough about that, really, and they're really soft, and it doesn't leave archaeological evidence. I'm thinking that there's more to what I've just said than I'm making out, and obviously, putting these bodies in the ground, when you put things into the ground, it's the realms of the underworld, the realms of the gods. And they were saying to gods, here's our livelihood, protect it first. But I would even go further. Pat knows this. She was there underground with me with Dr. Martin Carruthers, and he was in the greenhouse, in Kirkwall in Orkney, and there would be these holes, and there would be like a circular chamber. We've done this. We talked about this already, but there was a circular chamber, and there was these little areas that where you could just see the rock. Wasn't it down underground in the circular chambers with like dry stone wall, and there'd be gaps. And which you could see into the rock. And I can remember Martin Carruthers, he was shouting into the rock. He was saying, can you do this for me? You were communicating with the rock, and you're talking to the rock, you're talking to Mother Earth, right? And in a way, this is what you're doing with these bodies. We're going to hack and we're going to pound these bones, and we're going to smash them up, and we're going to chuck them in the ground, get really angry, get your anger out. And maybe this is what we're talking about. This is what some archaeologists believe. I can go with this quite easily, because humanity. I've actually got a role soon as a death camp commandant, where I've got to justify the deaths of people in a concentration camp, right? And basically, then I realised that everybody's capable of these terrible atrocities. But we're not talking about atrocities in this case. We're talking about people usurping the human form, and destroying the human form, and chucking the human form into this hole, smashing up the human form, for making the human form unusable. But the gods can put the human form together and reanimate the human form, because the gods are more powerful than the rest of us. And this is why you're placing the human form in a broken form into the ground, and you're destroying it. You're usurping the human form. And this is very much what I feel, and very much that you get the sense of this when you look at these bodies that are being smashed up in the ground. So they're not to do with fighting. They're not to do with this. Maybe there was somebody that you so hated, but I'm not really feeling a malevolence in this. I'm feeling more of a benevolent form of breaking and usurping and destroying and fouling up the human form and chucking it in the ground. It's a bit like an artist. It's a bit like the Dante's Infernos of the 1500s, right? Where you're destroying and you're making that the human form is something different, and then you look at artists who put the human form in a different way, like Picasso. You're distorting the human form in your art, and this is actually a physical distortion of the human form. So So Danebury itself, is it to do with clan leaders clashing, or is it to do with more sacrifices to offer this into the ground? And this is a big pit that's been added to over a period of time. This isn't a group of people that have just been tossed in here on a Wednesday afternoon, right? They've been added to the ground. Over there is the pit that we provide, and not an offering, provide our understanding of this world that is all around us. These people knew about death. I know about death. I've had sheep dying in my arms. I've had chickens and turkeys and all sorts dying in my arms. You get used to it, right? It's a thing that you get used to, um, and and it's just something that these people are very useful. So to try to offer something in a disrupted form to the ground is a very, very powerful thing. Any of us can chuck a body into the ground. How many of us can smash a human body up and put it into the ground? And this is the point. When artists do other things, like Damien Hirst. Damien Hirst is a good example. He's cutting who cuts a cow in two, and you look at all the organs. That's a very powerful statement, right? It's not like looking at work of Carl Larson, from Scandinavia, and seeing like a normal everyday family scene on a table. You've got Damien Hirst when he's cutting up a shark and
Oh
and
no,
you
cow.
and a sheep, yeah, he's done them all. And you're usurping the form of the animal, right? And you're offering. In other words, Damien Hirst is doing exactly the same as what I'm describing, except his is more openly visible in a cabinet.
I was wondering whether the chopping up of the people, was just a form of, that they would be recreated. Maybe they did
Yes,
it in an
yes,
afterlife, so that
yes,
they didn't burn
yes.
them, but they chopped them up, so that they would all come together. I don't know. Yeah.
No, no, you do know. You said it as an artist, and I completely agree with what you just said. That was exactly what I was saying.
Yeah.
And actually, this is what Barry Cunliffe says. These aren't just casual one-offs. They're part of a pattern of behavior, and this is really, really important. When he's talking about that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make one other state. I'm going to make a couple of other things, and unfortunately, this is where we end in a few moments. I don't want to end tonight, but we're going to have to sooner or later. Still enclosed by um hill fort ramparts used to yeah, he's talking about these banks and ditches keeping invaders. I don't agree with that, but when they've looked at this, they've actually started to see that this site is massively um usurping what we see as being the Iron Age, where you do find weapons, you do find life with the green, you find normal burials, you find usurping the human form, and you see that this whole world of the hill fort is definitely complex and definitely interesting to perceive. And just as we're really coming to the end of the Iron Age over the next few weeks, right? Let's just do a little bit of a recap. And this is from this article, which is really good. Here's what you need to know, right? So just think, right? The Iron Age was a violent period in British history lasting from 800 BC to the Roman invasion of AD 43. I don't believe that, right? But at Danebury, there was another form of violence. So that's one thing I wanted to read that out because I wanted to give you somebody else's take on what the Iron Age was like. I don't agree with that statement. Everything that I see doesn't agree with that. But with Danebury, there is a violence in a number of different ways. So let's just put that in there. Let's agree and disagree on that point. Obviously, this is a period which is dominated with iron and the prerequisite of pottery and lots of other amazing things. Obviously, we're not writing our own history, but we're seeing the history borne out in the archaeology. We're seeing farming and settlement like Caliver Atrebatum and Duropolis and Stanwick. We're seeing things changing. We're looking at coins, and we're looking at 50 years BC at the time of the time of Julius Caesar, and we're looking at the emergence then of tribes, and we do see one thing that women is a matriarchal society, not a patriarchal society. Women dominate this society. People lived in various different ways, and they offer us a varying palm play. That's a good word. I put that palm play of evidence that is the Iron Age. So what I'd like to do is just finally, as I said, I want to get this up to where I was last night with everybody else. And if I could, or can I just mention something really, really odd, which has nothing to do with this? When I'm doing my Roman videos, Roman era stone remains in Britain. Today I did a Roman temple site with columns and everything, which you can see near a place called Virginia Waters, which is south. Which is southwestern London, right? Virginia Waters, and basically what it is in the 1816, when the British Army had now taken Libya off France, because of the defeat of Napoleon, the local governor gave a gift of an entire Roman temple to the then King of Britain, right? And they reconstructed this entire temple from Leptis Magna, Temple of Augustus. They reconstructed it, and I didn't know you can actually see a proper, real, genuine Roman temple, except it's come from Leptis Magna in Libya, in Britain, and I thought that was absolutely amazing. So what I'd like to do is just mention a few little things with this, that what we need to think of, and maybe this is a good place to end today, is that like lots of hill forts, this is up there. It commands the landscape. Some can actually be in valley bottoms. But this is 143 meters above sea level. It dominates the local landscape, and it dominates the surrounding, wait for it, very rich cultivated soil. And there's a link there with the horse figures of Wiltshire, because when you look at sort of the Pusey horse, and you look at the oh God, I used to have all the names in my head, all the horse figures Westbury horse, yeah, Westbury horse. There's a dozen and a half of them. And the point is, they look over a very rich, cultivated landscape. And we do believe that lots of these horse figures go back thousands of years, like Uffington over 3,000 years. That there's a point there added, Anne, that they dominate rich agricultural landscapes, like these hill forts dominate rich agricultural landscapes in the main, and they're easily cultivated landscapes. So it's no wonder that you've got these hill forts plonked in the middle of them, usually taken up, devising their skills with a hillock, or when you look at Maiden Castle, sort of building a hill from nowhere, running up the hill by Kate Bush. On that note, I've actually got to where I want to be now, and then we'll do a little bit more about hill forts next week, and that will be hill forts done. We'll start off with Danebury next week, and there's one thing. Why have we got the Danebury meteorite in a little thing there, right? But we'll that's a question for next week. On that note, I like last night. It really worked. That worked tonight as well. So let's see if there's any questions. Oh, right. Let's start off with Anne's been pretty good tonight. She hasn't interrupted Goff once, have you, Anne? When Goff is talking, don't interrupt Anne, Goff. Don't interrupt him. Anne, anything you want to say?
No, I was just thinking that in these days of confusion and
Confucius, yeah.
It's nice to look back in an idealized sort of way at how Britain was before the chaos, erupted of civilization, really. But you can't have the good without the bad, it seems.
I think that's a good way of putting it. And actually, and I'll agree with you on that one. We get the corruption of Rome. We got the um, mutation of society by an outside influence that was which was unfamiliar to us. And then the interesting thing that Anne said is that when Roman civilizations collapsed in the West, people just revert back to the Iron Age, really,
Yeah.
the clarity, uh, which is an odd thing. But we keep
Do that.
Christianity out.
Isn't that what you're doing?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah,
Well,
Ju-
you
ju-
have to
ju-
start building some more Iron Age roundhouses so you
exactly.
can rent them.
Yeah, what the latest plan is with Michelle and I is to buy a house in the middle of nowhere, to rip out all the electricity, water, and gas, right? Because we have proven that you can collect your own water and have enough water for the year. You can create your own electricity without being on the mains. You can be connected to the world by having connections like this. In other words, we don't have to pay gas, water, and electricity bills. There is a way around it, but that's life. And they could do that in Wick because, to be honest with you, they're a bit backwards in Wick, and they're still using sort of um, they don't have electricity in Wick, so they appreciate what I'm saying. Right, anything you want to say, Anne?
No, so thank you, thank you.
By the way, Anne, when you have a white bandage on your arm, we're going to write our names on it.
Oh, I'm not gonna have a white one.
Chose blue.
I've got a purple one
Purple.
today, and it's on for 4 weeks. So I haven't got. I'm not gonna have a white one. You'll get filthy.
That's the whole point. Right. Don't interrupt. If there's nothing else from you, Anne, don't interrupt Goff, Anne. Don't whatever you do. Goff, anything you want to say?
No, nothing to say about it. Very interesting. Thank you very much.
All right, that's a shame. I wanted Anne to interrupt you. Richard, it's too
Uh,
late now, Anne. It's
Alright.
gone. It's gone. You've ruined it. You've gone. Richard, anything you want to say?
no, very interesting.
Good, good. Um, and what about you, Pat? Anything you want to say?
Oh, it's just amazing, a place with that many pits, you know. You don't usually hear about so many storage pits, you know, so yeah, what they were doing with them. So amazing. Totally different, you know. Thanks.
Well,
Many,
yeah,
many
it's
thanks,
good.
Pat. Many thanks.
Yeah.
Exactly. A sight of diver. And you're interrupting Pat. That's not
I
what you're
know.
supposed to do. No. Anyway, thanks for that, Pat. If you interrupt Henry, Henry's not going to care anyway. Henry, anything you want to say?
Just out of interest, have they aged how long that pit was actually in use?
I think the best I could work out, it was more than a few years. So obviously it wasn't, you know, it was over a period of time. The problem is that you've got with that is that multi-burial. So I think the evidence tells us is that they may have put some bones in there and then somebody jumped in there and mixed the bones up. So that's going to really muck with your dating evidence. But in that case, we do have a period of time that this pit is used for. So it's more than it's probably a few decades more than anything. Um, but it's definitely not just 1 year. So I think that does answer your question. It's more than a couple of years, but it's not say 50 years. It's maybe a decade or so.
And
Yeah.
the bodies in there were generally of what state of health? Oh,
Well,
Oh,
some were very healthy, some had disability, and some had disease. So it's not the
yeah.
problem is Henry, right? Is if it that's a really interesting point because it hits the sort of sacrificial thing on the head. Because when you look at sacrificial things specifically, what you're going to do, you're going to go with one category, i.e., you're going to go for roughly teenage boys, or you're going to go with roughly 30-year-olds, right? That's not. It's throughout the age range. You're also not going to clearly have people who are diseased, if you want people who are. So it's not. There's actually nothing telling us that there's any logic to that. And to be honest with you, if you're going to go through the process, smashing things up and breaking the bones, usurping the human form, as Anne said, to recreate the human form, you mustn't have order. So that ties in with what I'm saying, rather than a sacrificial thing. Can you get that? So if things are set sacrificially, like for example, you go look at most Inca bodies, they're all of around the same age. They're usually girls, and they're usually the same height. And they've but lots of bog bodies are the same. A majority of them in some areas are just all boys, or in another area are all girls with red hair. So it's not tying in with that at all. So it's not the same sacrifice in the usual way that we would see sacrifice.
No.
So
Yeah.
I was just questioning whether it's actually disposal of the weakest.
It's not. It's not just the weakest. No, it's not. It's a mix. As the note said, some of them buried in there were perfectly healthy, or so we can work out. If they've got like a sudden form of bone cancer or something like that, or something that's rapid, or they're a disease. They've got a disease that just kills people off like that. It's almost as if it's kin to a rapid disease, that like I don't know, a smallpox thing, or something like a virus, like a pandemic of some description. It's you're not going to show any signs on the body. But there is actually some quite odd with this. If it is a virus, it's only killing men of a certain category over a certain period of time. That makes no sense. It's just men. It might be that the women are so shirty they just want to get rid of the men.
Yeah. And they're just taking the pelvis and the certain parts of the body, keeping them separate, so that when the gods, recreate them, they'll have a pattern,
And also it makes sense that women might be smashing up the pelvis as a sense of control, of virility. I don't know, but there's lots of ways. But also the other thing as well is not all that's the point. Not all the pelvises are broken. Not all the skulls are smashed. Not all the long bones have been have been smashed up. So there's no. If you're going to do something ritualistically, if this is OCD gone mad, you're going to break all the right bones, or you're going to smash all the skulls in a certain way. There's no real ritual to it. It's like smash it all up and then put it in there, but in no real order. Oh, by the way, you didn't smash up the skull. Oh, don't worry about the gods and sort that out. We'll just chuck the lower mandibles in. It's fine. You with that one? Yeah, that's fine. Right. Anybody want to say anything else?
No, only
No.
that I'm really sorry I couldn't come to your play, and I really did miss going. But there we are. I was in the A&E till about 2 o'clock in the morning, and on Friday, and there's no way I could have got
And you don't have to apologize. It's fine. We'll have something local, probably early next year or something, and you can come along. It'll be fine.
All right then. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Okay. My pleasure. Anyone want to say anything else before we finish?
No.
No,
Okay.
that's great.
I really
Good night.
thank you, Henry. Thank you, everybody. So I'm going to say good night now. Good
Night.
night, Garth,
night.
Henry,
Good night.
Richard, Anne, and
Good
Pat.
night.
All-
Thank you very much for your support. Take
Bye,
care,
everyone.
guys. See you next
all,
week.
all enjoy and stay safe.
And you, darling, don't get a rocket on your head. No, no.
Yeah, I think that someone in the Royal Navy wants to have a word with you.
Yeah, yeah. We'll leave that one out, love. All right then.
Right then. Good night.
Good night.
God bless.
Good night, my darling. No, no.
Good night. God bless.
No, 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 no. In wax. Right, I'm gonna look at the thing now. Right, have you ever been doing something in your mind, starting to work things out, and you've just come up with solutions for things, and anyway, doing something in your mind starting to... There we go. Anyway, thank you very much for those watching online. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's, again, thank you for your support, and please join the channel if you so wish. Thank you. I'm going to look in the chat box. Nothing in the chat box 1. Nothing in the chat box 2. Nothing in the chat box 3. Nothing in that chat box 4. Nothing there 5. Nothing there 6. Nothing there 7. Nothing there 8. And nothing there 9. Yeah, I've got a problem with my car, actually. Waiting for a part to arrive. Life as we know it. Anyway, I'm going to look there. Nothing there. Like and subscribe. Nothing there. 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 Right, it's all done. Nothing in that chat box 1. Nothing 2 and 3. No, diolch yn fawr i chi. Nos da, am mor o hyd.